This is a Sky News special, live from Turkey's earthquake zone, where time is running out to reach survivors still clinging onto life under the rubble.
Here and in Syria, the need for help right now is urgent as this region faces the ultimate test.
Coming up, we'll meet the desperate families digging with basic tools and their bare hands.
I am the one waiting here for 40 hours. No one can escape an area here to touch.
Now we are dying here.
There is hope for some and incredible escapes too, including for this little girl pulled to safety in Syria.
More than 11,000 people are known to have died, with fears that numbers could triple.
With their homes destroyed, thousands now live in the freezing cold. We'll report from the mountain towns, decimated and without power.
Coming up, we'll assess what caused this disaster and why this region is so vulnerable to the forces of nature.
What would your message be?
I said, where are you?
And we hear the plea of a man far from home. I join Amit from South Wales on his mission to reach his family.
Hello, it's 6 o'clock here in Urfa and it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon in the UK. And this is a Sky News special programme in the devastating aftermath of the worst disaster to hit this region for more than 80 years. When that 7.8 magnitude earthquake struck southeastern Turkey and also northwestern Syria early on Monday morning, tremors were felt right across the Middle East, and as the day unfolded, so did the scale of this tragedy. 11,000 people confirmed dead. Nearly 5,000 buildings destroyed, tens of thousands of families without homes in freezing conditions. And from those who survived here and across the border in Syria, the message we've been hearing loud and clear is we need more help and we need it now. Sky News correspondents have reached some of the worst affected areas right across Turkey. From the devastated Gaziantep to the epicentre right down to the border with Syria, they've been hearing firsthand how people here have been struggling to survive. In Antakya, southwest of here, the fury of residents left to fend for themselves deepens by the hour. Our special correspondent Alex Crawford is there, a warning that coming up you'll see attempts to resuscitate a child who subsequently died, which many of our viewers may find distressing. We begin the programme with Alex's special report on this country's desperate search for survivors.
They're using bits of rubble, whatever they can get their hands on to reach those buried. Can anyone hear me? She's shouting. They can hear sounds. So they keep calling and listening for the loved ones who lived here. But they've come with little more than courage and a great deal of hope. And their tools make barely any impact on an 8-story building now all on the ground floor. Relatives look on, sick with worry. And a bubbling anger growing inside.
We have no electricity, we have no any additional machines to supply our machines. We have no support yet from the government. We have...
Now 40 hours, no one comes to touch this.
Nobody
are here to touch this. Understand? From the 40 hours. I am the one waiting here for 40 hours. No one can is came and area here to touch.
Now we are dying here,
No.
just dying, okay, just dying.
They stand in huddles weeping and find comfort by talking to the trapped children they may never see again. Be strong, Deniz, she's saying to him. Be strong, we are here. The fury is real and raw. The government's not here, she's shouting. Enough, enough, enough. This city, which hugs the Syrian border, appears to be one of the worst hit. It's home to a huge number of Syrian refugees who fled the war to safety here. And the Hatay mayor is from the main opposition party, stoking suspicions that this may have contributed to the little aid evident here. We saw residents helping themselves to food and supplies from a supermarket which had been broken into, but also saw a television being carted away. It's because we're hungry, one man told us. Desperation is haunting this city. For the love of God, please help us, she begs us. God, I'm waiting for help, she says. Her husband's trapped upstairs in their flat and has poor sight. Please, I expect help from my government.
There's so many people who feel they're not getting the help that they need.
Not one person, he tells us. We haven't seen a single soul here. We don't even have any water to drink or even have any bread to eat, she goes on. My daughter's in there with her 2 kids, another man tells us. They've died in that house. There are moments of sheer joy. A young baby is pulled out. After so many hours, she is a real living miracle. She's too young to remember what happened, but her family will remind her she's one who beat the odds on Turkey's terrible day of earthquakes. The baby's mother has somehow kept her alive, and she too has been found. They're both badly dehydrated, and the young mum looks traumatized. This has been a terrifying experience for them all. There are questions about how well prepared they were here for a disaster long predicted to happen. But every time someone is coaxed to safety and guided down the piles of broken concrete which were once their homes, it inspires the rescuers to keep on going. But there are far more suffering. Far too many mothers consumed by grief as the wafer-thin hope they were clinging on to finally disappears. The rescuers don't give up, though. There are frantic efforts to try to resuscitate her boy. They try and they keep on trying. But this is a young life they cannot save. This region is probably uniquely ill-equipped to cope with a natural disaster of this scale, and the heartache and grief is going to grow over the next few days and weeks.
Alex joining us now live from Antakya. Alex, there is certainly a distinct sense now that time is running out.
Time is critical in conditions like this, Kay. Every hour, every minute counts. Look at what they're having to face at the moment. I mean, there are houses, apartment blocks, even hospitals right next to me which have collapsed. And there is kilometre after kilometre here in Hatay. We're in Antakya, which is probably one of the worst impacted places in the whole of the country. And there has been a marked improvement in the tempo here. There have been a flood of volunteers, aid groups, mechanical diggers, all sorts of groups rushing to the area to help. President Erdogan has heard the complaints and he has reacted. He spent today visiting the earthquake zones, and he's just landed a few minutes ago before we came on air here in Hatay. He's admitted that he made mistakes, that there were problems in the first day, but now he says it's under control. Well, I think the residents here will take issue with the under control bit because they're still very much in desperate straits. We saw a short short while ago the first international team of search and rescue team groups to arrive here. They are from Britain. The 76-person team from Britain landed a couple of hours ago. They set to work, and within minutes of their arrival here on the ground, they were besieged by civilians begging them to help. They say they're going to stay here, and their aim is to try to save lives. But yes, every minute counts.
Alex Crawford, thank you.
Good afternoon, live from Gaziantep, where today people standing helpless among the rubble of their flattened homes were sent a message from the country's president as tens of thousands of people question why they're receiving so little help from the authorities. Today, as Alex was saying, a promise that nobody will be forced to cope alone.
We are carrying on managing with the rubble. God willing, we will start to remove the rubble. God willing, our aim is to rebuild houses in 1 year, as we already did previously in areas hit by earthquakes. Our people must not worry. We won't allow any of our citizens to be left in the streets.
President Erdogan there. So what's the reality? Is help really reaching those who need it most? The city of Kahramanmaraş is nearly 50 miles, that's around 80 kilometres north of here, towards the earthquake's epicenter. International correspondent John Sparks is there. John, you're in one of the worst affected areas. Is help getting in there?
Mark, that is it's a very, very good question, and I don't know the answer. Certainly a lot of people here who are very unhappy with the situation don't think they've had anywhere near enough help. In fact, where we are, and we're going to show you a few pictures in a minute, it's quite extraordinary. What they were telling us this morning was that they'd only just started to see rescue teams and heavy vehicles this morning. I'll tell you where we are. I mean, we are close to both epicenters on Monday. This is a housing estate, a housing precinct called the Abra site, and there were 9 apartment blocks here, up to 11 stories high. They have been pulled and pushed off their foundations, and this is a scene, it's an apocalyptic scene of total devastation. And what was happening earlier, there were volunteers, local people trying to pull bodies out through the concrete cracks in these buildings. They said they could hear the voices of people as well, telephones ringing in these blocks as well. They were trying to get people out, but a decision has been made. These diggers have arrived, and they are now tearing what's left of these buildings apart. And I can tell you that we have seen body bags being removed, small amounts of equipment coming in. And I'm going to ask my colleague Olivia just to focus on the people looking on. Many of those people have their friends, their loved ones, their relatives inside that building. They know they're there, and they are waiting. They have to wait to see what happens. It's a totally agonizing process for them. That's the scene, bitterly cold here. They'll be working through the night. Scene of total devastation here in Kahramanmaraş.
John, thank you very much indeed, and I should say it is a scene repeated right across this region, and it's clear that even anyone who managed to survive the tremors themselves is now struggling to withstand the really freezing temperatures here, only worsening this tragedy, of course. Families desperately searching the rubble, rescue teams sifting through the wreckage, all fighting the wintry weather that threatens to make this disaster even more deadly. Well, north of the epicenter in the Afsin region, snow is hampering the effort to find the missing. Our correspondent, Siobhan Robbins, is there.
So we've come to one of the rural villages in the Afshin area of Turkey. It's north of the epicenter, but you can see buildings here, families still affected. Here, the whole roof has collapsed. It looks like the side of the building also has come down as well. And that's not the only problem facing people here. You can also see when we swing round that they've lost power in some of the places in this village. So the power line down here, but also a very badly damaged family home there. You can see blankets popping out the side. The roof again has collapsed, and then the whole front of the building has been totally exposed, with the rubble falling onto what is potentially the family car. And the problem for people living in rural areas like this is, firstly, access to aid. We've spoken to volunteers who've managed to get here, and they said that no government aid has come here yet, that the government is focusing on the cities. They have no idea when they'll come to places like this, where there are 600 odd people living. So instead, volunteers are doing what they can. They're focusing on giving people blankets because of the bitter cold, giving people toilet paper, trying to give people water as well. With the power down, that's another problem as well that families here are facing. But also, if you have a look around, there's snow everywhere on the ground here. We're surrounded by mountains. It's bitterly cold, -8 at least today. And so the real focus here is on keeping warm. So that's a massive challenge for these communities, because not only do they have to contend with the damage done by the earthquake, but also for the cold weather and keeping themselves safe going forward.
Well, here in Urfa, a city in ruins, the cold only makes people even more desperate for help. Let us show you what we can see this afternoon. There may be flimsy tents to the world, but to these families, they are home, at least for now. Up to 25 people sharing just a few square feet. It's thin canvas walls protecting them from the elements, and it's bitterly cold here at night. Aid workers come 3 or 4 times a day, sometimes every hour, with steaming pots of soup or rice or both. But apart from that, there is little to protect these people from the depths of winter. As you can see the brazier in front of us as we walk down this row, this avenue of this tented city. Their homes are gone. Many only have the clothes they stand up in. One gentleman we met earlier can't even stand up. He is bowed by the strength of the earthquake and the subsequent damage to his property. They've only been here for a couple of days, these people also, but many people we spoke to are already weary, unsure how long this will need to be their homes. I'm not sure if we can make our way past this brazier or not, as Nathan shows you more of the tents here. We've got something like 1,500 people here at the moment. They've only been here, as I say, for a couple of days. Children gathering around us earlier. A welcome distraction, I suppose we were, from the monotony of their surroundings. 1,500 people, as I say, cramped together in a car park of the City Museum. That's what we're seeing. They're assured that more and more foreign aid is on the way. The UK dispatching search and rescue teams along with similar measures from many other countries. But these people need more. They've escaped with their lives from their crumbling homes. Now they need food, more substantial shelter and hope for the moment and also for the future. For those in Syria, this week's destruction and loss, is a crisis that we are hearing about within a crisis. The situation only worsening, the lives of those allegedly living in ghost cities shelled out and damaged by the country's 11-year civil war. While some aid is starting to reach parts of Turkey, in Syria the situation is quite different. More than a decade of turmoil dramatically limiting the path for help. Many of the hardest hit areas are in the northwest of the country, which is controlled by rebel groups. The Assad government only allows United Nations aid to enter the region through one border crossing at Bab al-Hawa, but this route was damaged by the earthquake, hampering the relief efforts. For thousands of Syrians already displaced by the horror of the war, homelessness again. Let's get more information from Alex Rossi.
She is alive, but only just. With her skin raw from cold and trauma, she's kept warm in an incubator. Just hours ago, she was plucked from the rubble, still attached by umbilical cord to her mother, who was crushed to death in the earthquake. The girl has a large bruise on her back and it's swollen. There are also bruises on the rest of her body, the doctor says. And this is the moment she was rescued. An orphan at birth, the only survivor of her immediate family. Her tragedy is the story of countless other children in a disaster which continues to get worse. In many areas of Syria, they are still trying to scrape away at the piles of rubble, looking for survivors. It's no easy task in a place already devastated by more than a decade of war. The search has been hampered by a lack of heavy equipment, and getting supplies to the rebel-held areas, cut off from much of the outside world, is frustrating the humanitarian response. Damascus says aid must pass through its territory if it's to enter the country, and the only workable route bypassing the regime through Turkey is badly damaged. And need is growing by the hour. There are so many injured here waiting for treatment.
About 70% of the patients that we're receiving are children. This is horrific. You can imagine that our healthcare infrastructure here is already collapsed after the 12 years of war. There's severe funding cuts. We were already struggling before this crisis hit us. Right now, our hospitals are not coping. Our doctors are totally overwhelmed. We've been working flat out without sleep since the earthquake hit. I mean, it's just disastrous.
As the search goes on, the number of dead keeps rising. The sound of grief is reverberating across this region, and it is distressing. This is Ahmad Idris, and at his feet, covered with blankets, are the 25 members of his family. All of them killed in an instant when the earthquake struck without warning. He takes the body of his grandson in his arms. It's simply heartbreaking. The weight of suffering, too much to bear.
We fled the war. Look at the injustice that pursues us and what happened to us. We came here on the basis of finding a safe shelter for us and our children. But in the end, look how fate has caught up to us here.
They will keep searching, but the devastation that sweeps as far as the eye can see is a constant reminder of how much the teams on the ground have left to do. The next few hours will be crucial, but in Syria, as elsewhere, hope is fading of finding more survivors. Alex Rossi, Sky News.
Well, for thousands of Syrians already displaced by the horror of war, now they're homeless once again because of the earthquake. Major international efforts to get aid to the worst affected are underway. Our correspondent, Yusra El-Bagir, flew on an aid flight from an airbase near Doha, the capital of Qatar. It landed here in Gaziantep, where the much-needed packages are to be handed out. And Yusra joins us live now. And you've been hearing from people already displaced by war, now without homes again.
Yeah, Mark, I mean, just as we've been standing here, they've signalled that they found 2 bodies and they're using blankets to cover the area as they pull out, unfurl body bags and start to move bodies into the body bags. And we've been at this site all day. A body was removed from the rubble earlier. There was a son and daughter screaming with tears as they found out that their mother had been killed by the earthquake. And just now, more bad news, more devastating news for the people that have been waiting here all day, who've not only lost their homes, but have lost their families. And we've seen, you know, the stages of grief pass through this site. In the morning, there was a shock, a sort of a hopeful silence, and then that turned into anger, and now just sheer excruciating grief. The loss not only of loved ones, but also of homes. And as you said, people have fled war and come here to Gaziantep. This is a city synonymous with providing refuge for people fleeing the war in Syria. And now again, they've spoken to us and they've said that this has brought them back to that memory of being cold, of being homeless and not knowing where to go.
Yusra, thank you very much indeed. Joining me now is Paul Taylor, who is International Operations Manager of REACT, the charity, and the scale of this tragedy, Paul. I mean, it must make things so difficult for you.
Yes, it does. And the only thing I've got as a point of reference is very similar for me to Nepal in 2015. You know, two earthquakes, one after the other, lots of aftershocks, and sadly, similarly, the amounts of people who've lost their lives. And just a desperate need. Absolutely. And as we can see here, the focus now, quite rightly, is on the search and rescue. And in my experience, it all depends on your circumstances. You know, when the building collapses on top of you, people may well be injured. It depends how much air you've got. You might have an air pocket. Have you got water with you? And as time gets on, the chances for them surviving are just less and less. Yeah, and if we can just go in on this, well, hopeful rescue that is taking place behind us here. There was real optimism this morning, Paul, because there was someone pulled out alive, and they say it is the sort of building where, and the way it's collapsed means there could well be voids in there. But you know, these rescues going on, or hopeful rescues going on, day and night, and just the people around just watching and waiting, it's just desperate. I think that's a really interesting point on people watching and waiting, and increasingly in the humanitarian sector I think there's an awareness of what are the psychosocial aspects, particularly for young children. You can imagine people potentially have lost their parents, they've witnessed a building falling around them and they've survived. What does that do for that young person? So I think there's a requirement there for support for them as soon as they can possibly get it. OK, so what sort of help are you trying to get in here? So what we're trying to do now is, after this phase, as the people are being found in places like this, we're addressing their core humanitarian needs, which are always fairly similar. So they're going to need shelter, particularly as it's so cold. They're going to need water. The medical needs are going to be addressed if they're injured. And then further down the line a little bit, they're going to need food. All right. Well, look, Paul, good luck with the work you're doing. Thanks very much. Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, on the ground, the damage is absolutely inescapable, but the sheer scale of the devastation could hardly be more stark than when seen from above. A series of satellite images released today show how towns which once stood are now reduced to rubble. This was the town of Izalya in Gaziantep in southeast Turkey last October, but take a look at it now. This new satellite image was taken yesterday, showing where properties have entirely collapsed, while others have their roofs split off from the building below. Here was the highly populated city of Nordagya. This shows the downtown area last September, but see the screen swipe across, and this is the situation now. Buildings clearly destroyed, and take a look at the main road, for example, where the white rectangles are all emergency tents erected as part of the aid effort. And finally, look here to see another part of that same downtown Nordagya. The grass area on the left now filled with more of those emergency tents as officials attempt to do all they can to save lives. Well, it's more than 20 years since an earthquake hit northern Turkey, killing more than 17,000 people, 1999. The entire region particularly vulnerable because of where it sits on the planet's plates. Our science editor, Tom Clark, explains the tectonics of the tragedy.
The initial earthquake struck overnight on the East Anatolian fault line that runs through southern Turkey. And at 7.8 on the magnitude scale, is by far the largest in the region in living memory. This map shows the worst of the shaking in red, tracing the fault line as it runs close to the city of Gaziantep. But the power of the quake meant it affected hundreds of other cities and towns in the region. See here where orange and yellow lines show significant shaking in Syria, and tremors felt as far as Cyprus. Then there are aftershocks. Shown here in orange are the typical quakes, diminishing in magnitude and frequency along the fault line over the morning. But what makes this event so unusual is that 9 hours after the initial quake, a huge 7.5 magnitude aftershock, almost as strong as the first, happened here 100 kilometres to the north in Kahramanmaraş province. As well as being violent, both the initial quake and that aftershock were relatively shallow in the Earth's crust, 18 and 10 kilometres deep respectively. the closer to the surface, the more damage a quake will cause. Turkey and northern Syria are vulnerable to earthquakes. They sit at the junction of 4 tectonic plates with fault lines along their margins. These latest quakes occurred on what's called a strike-slip fault. The Anatolian plate is being pushed westwards at a rate of about 2 centimetres a year by the northward movement of the Arabian plate. And it was the sudden release of this stress that's built over many decades that caused this disaster. And in geological terms, it's one of Turkey's worst. The town of Izmit was shaken by a 7.6 magnitude earthquake in 1999, killing more than 17,000. But not since 1939 has there been an earthquake as violent, when more than 30,000 people died in a 7.8 magnitude quake around Erzincan. But crude measures of geological force don't tell us much about the human scale of this tragedy. It'll be days before that becomes clearer.
Well, for those who live here in Turkey, the sense of loss, of course, is unimaginable. For those who woke up in the UK to news of the tragedy that was unfolding overnight, there was only one real response: get here, and get here fast. We met Ahmet Yilnaz, who left his home in South Wales to travel here to the disaster zone on a desperate mission to reach his family in the remote village of Tut in the Taurus Mountains, where he grew up. This is the story of the heartbreak of a brother's journey.
In a country in despair, Ahmet Yilnaz is a broken man. We came across him amid the chaos of one of the few functioning airports here. Having made the journey from South Wales, he is desperately trying to find a way to reach the mountain village he grew up in.
I mean, it's completely collapsed.
This is what is left of his brother Ali's house. Ali is dead, his wife seriously injured, and 2 of his children are missing in the rubble. We decide to take him, or at least to get as close as we can. Halfway there, he gets a call from his surviving niece to say no one is coming to help them. Ahmet cannot bear it. Once we're up in the mountains, it is not an easy journey. We finally reach the village, the damage, the reality of it all. And for Ahmet, reunited with his sister Fatah, the uncontrollable grief. Also waiting for him, his surviving niece, Sidka. It is her sisters, Ashagul and Zara, that they are looking for now. It is heartbreaking.
They said, you know, the top floor and the middle floor.
Ahmet tells me it was a house full of joy and love, and now his family is destroyed.
So Ahmet, just tell me, when you see this, what goes through your mind?
That on the mind, it's unbelievable. I never see this. I am very shocked. I never see this happen before my life. Never.
He says the locals want to know where the government help is. The truth is, the government is overwhelmed.
What would your message be?
I said, where are you? We need the people accommodation. Everybody's street, you see? Only local people, they come, neighbors or friends, they will try help. Where is the government?
In these remote, snowy villages, they will have a long wait.
I'm very sorry for your loss.
Yeah.
Very sorry.
That's right. I can't believe it.
One man facing the enormity of it all in this country of countless tragedies.
The scale of the disaster unleashed by the earthquake can sometimes feel dehumanizing. We've heard many stories here, some tragic, some full of hope.
As the clock ticks down on the rescue effort, aid is beginning to arrive. For some, it will prove life-saving. For others, it is already too late. We'll leave you now with some of the strongest images of the last few days.
koş koş koş koş.
Sesimi duyan biri var mı?
Bir dakika, tamam inşallah çıkacaklar. Tamam
İnşallah
çıkacaklar.
ne olur yavrum.
Bebeğini satırız.
Yavrum ne olur.
Yüreğimiz yanıyor. Devlet gelsin, yedirsin.
Maşallah. Çekil baba. Hadi gel baba. Arkadaşlar. Çantaya 2 tane hazırlıyorum. Tamam. Okey hazır olun.